Clara, if the house ever calls you by name, do not answer. That was the last thing my mother said to me, though I believed she was speaking through medication, confusing some old nightmare with the white walls of her hospital room. 3 days later, Diane Bennett was gone, and 2 weeks after that, a lawyer slid a property deed across his desk and told me I had inherited a house in Greyhaven, Massachusetts. I had never heard of Greyhaven. I had never owned a house. My mother had spent 34 years insisting our family had no roots beyond the apartment where she raised me. Yet there it was in fading black ink. 17 Hollow Creek Road, transferred to Diane Bennett in 1992, with my name added as co-owner 7 years later, when I was 8. The lawyer could not explain why. He only said the taxes had been paid from an account that closed the morning my mother died. I should have signed the necessary papers and walked away. Instead, 4 days later, I was driving north through October rain, following a road between forests stripped nearly bare by the wind. Greyhaven appeared without warning, a cluster of brick buildings, a church steeple, and rain-dark streets. Hollow Creek Road began at the edge of town and continued for 3 miles before the houses disappeared. Number 17 stood alone behind a rusted gate. It was larger than I expected, dark cedar siding and steep gables, with windows reflecting bare trees. The house had been sealed for more than 30 years, but the knocker was polished, and a porch light glowed even though the electricity was disconnected. I told myself there had to be a generator, anything ordinary enough to keep me from turning around. The key from the lawyer fit the lock without resistance. When I opened the door, warm air carried the scent of beeswax, old paper, and something floral. The entry hall should have been buried in dust. Instead, the floorboards looked freshly swept. A table stood against the wall with a ceramic bowl. Inside were 9 keys, each marked with a tag. 8 tags bore names I did not recognize. The 9th was blank. I did not touch them. I stepped into the living room and found every piece of furniture draped in white cloth except one wooden chair in the rug center. There was no dust on its seat. Shallow marks in the carpet behind it suggested someone had recently pulled it back to sit down. I called out, first softly, then louder, but the house returned my voice in strange echoes that seemed to travel upward instead of outward. I spent the next hour opening curtains, checking doors, and photographing anything that might matter to the sale. The rooms were empty, but not abandoned. In the kitchen, a clean glass sat upside down beside the sink. In the upstairs bathroom, a damp ring marked the porcelain basin. In the bedroom at the end of the hall, the mattress was bare, yet the pillow held a faint hollow the size of a head. By dusk, the rain was too heavy for the drive back to Boston. Cell service had vanished, and the road beyond the gate was collecting water. I found candles in the pantry, dry firewood beside the hearth, and 2 unopened bottles of water in the refrigerator, both dated that year. That bothered me more than anything. Someone had been maintaining the house. Someone knew I was coming. I lit a fire and sat on the uncovered chair because it was the only place that did not feel prepared for someone else. The silence grew deeper after dark. It was not the peaceful silence of an empty building. It felt attentive. The house seemed to be holding its breath around me in the dark. Every small sound arrived separately. Rain tapping the windows, timbers settling in the walls, the soft tick of a clock that had no hands. At 2:13 in the morning, I woke to my mother's voice saying my name. I had fallen asleep in the chair, and for one confused second I expected to see her standing in the doorway wearing the blue cardigan she kept at the hospital. The room was empty. Then the voice came again, quieter, from inside the wall behind me. Clara. I stood so quickly the chair scraped across the floor. My mother had been dead for 19 days, but I knew every detail of that voice. The careful way she shaped my name when frightened, the breath she took before saying something she did not want me to hear. I pressed my palm against the wallpaper. The plaster beneath it was warm. Do not let the house remember you, she whispered. A slow tapping began under my hand, 3 measured knocks from somewhere inside the wall. I stepped back without answering. Across the room, the cloth covering the mantel slipped to the floor by itself. Behind it hung a framed document sealed beneath cloudy glass. I lifted my candle and saw another copy of the deed. Diane's name was written near the bottom. Beneath it, in ink several shades darker, was mine. Clara Bennett, legal owner, effective October 14th, 1999. My 8th birthday. Something moved beneath the floorboards. Not footsteps. A voice, low and close, spoke from directly under the chair. Owner 9 has returned. The voice beneath the floor did not speak again, but the silence it left behind felt worse than any answer. I stood beside the chair with the candle trembling in my hand, staring at the floorboards as though they might open beneath me. The rain pressed against the windows, steady and cold, and somewhere in the walls the 3 knocks came again. I did not answer. I gathered my coat, the deed, and the flashlight from my bag, then moved toward the front door. The handle turned, but the door would not open. I pulled harder. The lock clicked. The hinges groaned. Still, the door remained fixed in place, as if someone on the other side held it shut. I tried the kitchen entrance next, then the narrow side door near the pantry. Neither moved. The windows were no better. Every latch lifted easily, but the glass refused to rise. I told myself the frames had swollen in the rain. I told myself old houses trapped heat, shifted, settled, and made sounds that resembled human voices. I kept telling myself ordinary things until a soft melody drifted down from the second floor. It was a lullaby with no words, only a woman humming 3 descending notes, pausing, then repeating them. My mother used to hum the same tune whenever storms kept me awake. I had never heard it anywhere else. The melody stopped when I reached the stairs. I raised the flashlight and climbed slowly, one hand sliding along the banister. The wood was warm beneath my palm. At the landing, the hallway appeared longer than it had earlier, stretching farther into darkness than the dimensions of the house should have allowed. I counted 6 doors. I remembered 5. The last one stood at the far end, painted a faded blue that caught the beam of my flashlight like dull water. I took one step toward it, and the door vanished. There was only wallpaper, pale with age, patterned with tiny gray flowers. I stayed there until I began to doubt what I had seen. Then a sound came from the bedroom behind me. A single metallic click, followed by the whir of a machine turning on. On the dresser sat my portable audio recorder. I had left it downstairs in my equipment bag. The red light glowed. The timer showed that it had been recording for 11 minutes. I stopped it and played the file. At first there was only static and rain. Then my own footsteps crossed the living room. I heard the chair scrape, the voice under the floor, and my breathing as I moved from one locked exit to another. Beneath those sounds ran a frequency so low I felt it more than heard it. I put on my headphones and increased the gain. The low vibration separated into layers. One was the slow creak of timber. Another was the hum of old wiring, impossible in a house with no electricity. Beneath both was a woman speaking backward. I transferred the file to my laptop and reversed the section. My mother's voice emerged clearly. The walls keep what we cannot carry. After that came a child counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The child paused. A second voice whispered, "There should be 9. I removed the headphones. At that exact moment, something small rolled across the hallway floor. I stepped into the doorway and saw a brass key spinning near my shoe. It was old, long-stemmed, and darkened around the teeth. I had seen it before, although not in my own life. An image came to me with such force that I gripped the doorframe. I saw a kitchen brighter than the one downstairs, its cabinets painted yellow, sunlight falling across a black and white tile floor. A man in a short-sleeved shirt stood beside the sink. His face remained hidden beyond the edge of my vision, but I watched his hand remove the same brass key from his pocket. He knelt, loosened a narrow pipe beneath the basin, and pushed the key into the hollow opening. Then the image disappeared. I was back in the dark bedroom, my heart pounding, the key resting against my shoe. I carried it downstairs and entered the kitchen. The cabinets were no longer yellow. The floor was plain wood. Yet beneath the sink, behind a rusted drain pipe, I found a capped section exactly where the man had hidden it. When I opened it, the pipe was empty. The key in my hand was cold enough to sting my fingers. I set it on the counter. It rolled by itself, stopped at the edge, then turned until its teeth pointed toward the hallway. I followed. The key guided me past the living room, where the white cloth had somehow returned to the mantel, and toward a narrow door beneath the staircase. I had assumed it was a closet. The brass key did not fit its lock, but when I touched the handle, a voice sounded from inside. A little girl was counting again. This time she reached 8, then began to cry. Another voice, calm and male, said, "Start over. The house forgets anyone who misses a number." I opened the door. Inside was not a closet, but a shallow space lined with plaster. Dozens of names had been written across the walls in pencil. Some were faded nearly white. Others looked recent. I recognized Diane Bennett near the bottom. Beneath her name was mine, written in the uneven handwriting of a child. Next to it was a date, October 14th, 1999. I reached toward the letters, and a memory opened inside me. I was 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on that floor, while my mother knelt in front of me. She looked younger, terrified, and kept glancing over her shoulder. She pressed one finger to my lips and whispered, "Whatever calls you, do not say your name." I remembered the smell of damp plaster. I remembered the brass key in her hand. I remembered a woman humming beyond the wall. I also remembered something that could not be true. I remembered living in this house. The closet door slammed behind me. Darkness closed around me, and the little girl's voice began counting. From 1. When she reached 8, the wall in front of me gave 3 slow knocks. Then my own voice, 8 years old and frightened, whispered from inside the plaster. "Clara, please remember where we hid the key." The voice inside the plaster sounded exactly like mine, but younger, thinner, and nearly out of breath. I held the brass key against my palm and tried the closet door again. It did not move. The child began counting from 1, each number slower than the last, as though waiting for me to interrupt. When she reached 7, I pressed both hands against the wall where the knocking had come from. The plaster felt soft beneath my fingertips. Not wet, not crumbling, but warm and faintly flexible, like skin stretched over something hollow. 8, the child whispered. The wall moved inward with a quiet sigh. A narrow seam appeared between 2 names, and cold air slipped through it. I pushed harder until a hidden panel opened just wide enough for me to crawl through. Beyond it was a passage between the walls, no more than 3 feet across, lined with rough beams and old electrical wire. My flashlight flickered as I entered. The panel closed behind me before I could turn around. I followed the passage because there was nowhere else to go. Names had been carved into the beams at shoulder height. Harold Voss, Margaret Reed, Samuel and Nora Pike, Edith Crane, Thomas Vale, Daniel Mercer. Below them, one ownership entry had been gouged so deeply that only a few unreadable strokes remained. Diane Bennett appeared next. 8 ownership entries in all, followed by my name, cut beneath hers in shallow, unfinished letters. Each entry appeared beside a date. The earliest was 1928. The most recent was mine. At the far end, the passage opened into the kitchen wall behind the sink. I could see the room through a gap in the boards, but it was not the kitchen I had entered earlier. The cabinets were yellow. The floor was black and white tile. Morning light filled the room, even though outside it was still dark. A man stood at the sink holding the brass key. I recognized the short-sleeved shirt from the memory, but this time I could see more of him. He was middle-aged, with gray at his temples and a wedding ring on his left hand. He whispered to someone I could not see. "Every owner leaves something behind. That is how it learns us." A woman answered from the hallway. "It does not learn. It remembers." The man placed the key inside the pipe. As soon as he withdrew his hand, the kitchen changed. The yellow cabinets darkened to brown. The tile vanished beneath faded linoleum. A family sat around the table wearing clothes from another decade. A little boy stared at the wall behind me while his parents argued in low voices. "There is a woman in there," he said. Neither parent looked at him. "She says this room belongs to the first owner." The kitchen shifted again. Wallpaper peeled away, then returned in a different pattern. Different people crossed the room, each moving through a moment that felt private and unfinished. A woman burned a letter in the sink. A man hid money beneath a loose board. An elderly couple stood hand in hand, while a clock stopped at 2:13 in the morning. The scenes passed one through another until I realized I was not watching a history of the house. I was watching what each owner had been unable to forget. My recorder clicked on inside my coat pocket. The small red light glowed through the fabric. I removed it and listened through one earbud. The machine captured none of the voices in front of me. Instead, it recorded my breathing and another sound behind it, the steady turning of pages. "Clara," a man said from the kitchen. The visions disappeared. The room returned to the present, dark and empty. Someone stood in the doorway holding a flashlight. "Clara Bennett?" I backed away from the gap. "Who are you?" "Ethan Cole, County Records Office." He lifted both hands where I could see them. "I was assigned to verify the ownership correction before the probate transfer." The lawyer said you had come to the property. When I arrived, your car was outside, and the front door was open. I looked toward the living room. The front door stood wide. Rain blew across the threshold. I crawled out through the panel near the sink, though I could not remember seeing an opening there before. Ethan stared at the brass key in my hand. His face lost color. Where did you find that? Inside the house. That key appears in 3 separate property reports, he said. Different decades, different owners. Each report claims it was lost. By sunrise, we were sitting at the kitchen table with files spread between us. Ethan had brought copies of deeds, tax records, and statements from previous occupants. The county file listed 8 ownership entries before mine, ending with Diane. The official records looked ordinary until he showed me the personal reports attached to them. Every identified owner had complained of missing time. Harold Voss lost 1 full day in 1931. Margaret Reed lost 2 nights in 1948. Samuel and Nora Pike could not remember the final 72 hours they spent in the house. Edith Crane left behind a note saying she had begun remembering a childhood that belonged to someone else. Thomas Vale reported waking in rooms that did not exist on the floor plan. Daniel Mercer reported finding the same brass key after throwing it into the creek twice. The 7th ownership entry had been scraped from the county copy, leaving only damaged paper and an unreadable date. Diane's file contained no statement, only a sealed correction adding my name to the deed in 1999. There is something else, Ethan said. He unfolded the original blueprint. The house should have 7 main rooms. I counted the spaces marked in black ink. Living room, dining room, kitchen, 3 bedrooms, and a study. There are more than 7 now. I know. He placed photographs beside the blueprint. They showed the same interior across different years. In every photograph, one room appeared that was absent from the official plan. Its location changed from owner to owner. Sometimes it was upstairs, sometimes behind the kitchen, sometimes beneath the stairs. The door was always painted blue. I thought of the hallway stretching into darkness and the door that vanished when I moved toward it. Ethan pointed to a handwritten note at the bottom of the oldest survey. The first owner called it the unnumbered room. The brass key turned in my hand. Without my moving it, a soft click came from the hallway. Ethan and I looked up. The wallpaper at the far end had split down the center. A blue door stood where there had been only a wall. From behind it came the sound of several people whispering at once. Their words overlapped until one voice rose above the others. It was my mother. Do not open it until you know which memory is yours. The handle began to turn from the other side. The handle stopped turning the moment Ethan reached for it, as though whatever stood on the other side had sensed his hand. Neither of us spoke. The blue paint was blistered with age, yet the brass knob looked newly polished, and a thin line of warm light shone beneath the door. My mother's warning still seemed to hang in the hallway. Do not open it until you know which memory is yours. Ethan unfolded the oldest blueprint again and held it beside the wall. According to the measurements, there was barely 2 feet of space beyond the door before the exterior siding. No room could exist there. We should leave, he said. The front entrance slammed shut behind us. The sound traveled through the house like a judge's gavel. Every covered piece of furniture shifted beneath its sheet, not enough to reveal what was underneath, but enough to suggest that the room had taken one slow breath. The brass key grew hot in my palm. I nearly dropped it. Its teeth pointed toward a narrow keyhole beneath the knob, one I was certain had not been there seconds earlier. It wants you to use it, Ethan whispered. It wanted every owner to use it. I inserted the key. Before I could turn it, the lock opened by itself. The door swung inward without a sound. Beyond it waited a room no larger than a walk-in closet, with no windows and no furniture. Layer upon layer of wallpaper covered the walls, patterns from different decades pressed over one another. Faded roses showed through gray stripes. Yellow vines emerged beneath blue geometric shapes. Names had been written across every layer, some in ink, some in pencil, some traced by children. A bare bulb hung from the ceiling, glowing without electricity. Ethan remained in the hallway. Clara, do not go in alone. I stepped across the threshold before I could stop myself. The air smelled of rain, dust, and the floral perfume that had greeted me when I entered the house. The door closed behind me. Ethan's voice became faint, as though he were calling from the far end of a tunnel. I turned toward the knob, but the wall had already covered it. The blue door was gone. The bulb above me flickered once, and the room changed. The wallpaper peeled backward in layers without falling. Each pattern disappeared into the plaster, revealing another year beneath it. The temperature dropped. Then I was no longer alone. A young Diane stood near the wall wearing a green raincoat, her hair dark and loose around her shoulders. She could not see me. Beside her was a woman I had never met but somehow recognized. She had my eyes, my hands, and the same slight tilt of the head I saw whenever I looked at photographs of myself. She held a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. "We cannot stay here," the woman said. Diane glanced toward a man standing near the doorway. His face was hidden in shadow, even though the rest of the room was brightly lit. "The roads are flooded," Diane replied. "Then we leave on foot." "Lucy, listen to me." The name struck me harder than the cold. Lucy tightened her arms around the child. "He knows about the papers. He knows I prepared the transfer." The shadowed man moved, and the room shifted before I could see him clearly. The same walls appeared beneath different wallpaper. Diane was alone now, kneeling beside a floor vent with the brass key in her hand. She pressed it into the pipe while someone pounded on the blue door from outside. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry." The scene vanished. Another took its place. An elderly woman sat in a chair with her back to me, speaking to the empty room. "You show us what we fear, not what happened." The wallpaper changed again. A little boy counted to 8 while his mother covered her ears. A man wrote a confession on a sheet of paper, then stared at the words as if they belonged to someone else. An older couple stood beneath the bulb, arguing over which of them had first heard a baby crying inside the wall. Every memory overlapped with the next. Voices filled the room until I could no longer tell which words belonged to which owner. The house was not showing me history in order. It was arranging pain by resemblance. Abandonment beside guilt. Fear beside denial. Love beside the memory of failing to protect it. Through the noise, the baby in Lucy's arms began to cry. Lucy turned, and for the first time, someone inside the memory looked directly at me. Her face went still. "Clara," she said. I could not breathe. Diane continued speaking beside her, unaware that anything had changed, but Lucy stepped away from the scene and crossed the room toward me. The baby remained in her arms, yet I could see through the yellow blanket as though both of them were made of candlelight. "You came back," she whispered. "You can see me?" My voice sounded small. "Only here. This room remembers all of us at once." "Who are you?" Her expression softened with such deep sadness that I already knew the answer would change everything. "You know my name." Behind her, Diane repeated the same sentence over and over. "I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. Why did my mother bring me here when I was 8? I asked. Lucy glanced toward the shadowed man. "Diane brought you back because the house had started calling from far away. She thought returning the key would silence it." "What happened in 1992? The room shuddered. The layered wallpaper lifted from the walls like pages caught in a wind. Lucy looked over her shoulder, frightened now. "That memory is divided." Diane carried one version. He carried another. I carried the last. "Who is he?" The shadowed man turned toward us, but darkness still concealed his face. A low voice came from every wall at once. "She is not ready to remember me." Lucy pressed the baby against her chest and stepped closer. "Find Evelyn Shaw," she said. "Ask her who left this house with you." Why would she know? Because she watched from across the road. The bulb swung overhead. The room stretched wider, then narrowed again. I heard Ethan pounding against the missing door and calling my name. Lucy's outline began to fade. I reached for her, but my hand passed. Through cold air. "Wait, what are you to me?" Her eyes filled with recognition, not surprise. She looked down at the child in the yellow blanket, then back at me. "Diane loved you enough to become your mother," she said. "But she was not the woman who gave birth to you." The wall behind me split open. Ethan pulled me backward into the hallway as the blue door slammed shut. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then I looked down and saw that I was holding a corner of yellow cloth. Ethan stared at it, then at me. From behind the door, Lucy's voice whispered one final sentence. "I am your mother, Clara." The yellow cloth in my hand smelled like rain and the same floral perfume that had followed me through every room. Ethan wanted to leave immediately, but the front door had locked again, and the windows reflected a gray morning that never seemed to brighten. I wrapped the cloth in a clean towel and placed it beside my recorder. A few minutes later, The lock released for Ethan, then clicked shut before I could follow him. When I played the file from the unnumbered room, most of it contained only static, layered whispers, and the dull pounding of Ethan trying to reach me. Then, beneath Lucy's final words, I heard the click of a cassette player. The sound was faint but precise, a button being pressed, plastic gears turning, and tape sliding across a recording head. I searched the room again, beginning with the walls closest to where Lucy had stood. Behind the oldest layer of wallpaper, my fingers found a small rectangular hollow. Inside was a microcassette wrapped in wax paper. The label had faded, but one word remained legible in blue ink: Clara. My hands shook as I carried it to the kitchen. Ethan drove into town and returned with an old handheld recorder from the county archive. When he came back, the front door opened for him again as if the house had been waiting. The machine resisted at first. Its motor whined, then caught. A woman inhaled through the speaker. "My name is Lucy Bennett," she said. Her voice was softer than it had been in the room, but I recognized it immediately. "This recording is for my daughter, Clara, in case Diane succeeds where I cannot." I closed my eyes. Ethan sat across from me without moving. "Clara was born on October 14th, 1991, Lucy continued. "Diane is my sister. She has promised to take Clara if I do not leave Greyhaven tonight. I pray she never has to keep that promise." Rain hissed beneath her words. Somewhere in the background, a baby made a small, restless sound. "Her father is Robert Kane. His name is on the original deed, though he has tried to remove it from every copy. He believes ownership gives him the right to decide who stays, who leaves, and what is remembered. He is wrong." The tape clicked off. I rewound it twice, but the rest was blank. Ethan unfolded the property records and found a faint indentation where a name had been scraped from the paper. Under angled light, the letters appeared one by one. Robert Kane. I did not know that name, yet hearing it filled me with a fear that felt older than memory. By noon, the rain had slowed enough for us to walk across Hollow Creek Road. Evelyn Shaw lived in a narrow white house behind a fence covered with dead ivy. She opened the door before we knocked. She was small, silver-haired, and watched me with the expression of someone seeing a person return from a grave she had never visited. "You have Lucy's eyes," she said. Her living room faced number 17 through a wide picture window. A pair of binoculars rested on the sill beside a stack of notebooks. Evelyn had recorded every family that entered the house since 1965. Dates, license plates, moving trucks, lights turning on in sealed rooms. When I told her what Lucy had said, she did not seem surprised. "Diane brought you out during the storm," Evelyn said. "You were wrapped in yellow. She carried you across the road and begged me to hide you until morning." "Where was Lucy?" Evelyn looked toward the house. "Still inside." "Did Robert leave?" "He drove away before dawn, but not when he claimed. He was there for hours after Lucy disappeared." Ethan asked whether she had told the police. Evelyn nodded. "They searched the property. They found no body, no sign of struggle, and no room where Diane said Lucy had been trapped. The blue door was gone by sunrise." She opened a notebook dated 1992. One line had been underlined several times. "Diane left with infant. Robert left alone. Lucy never exited. Why did Diane tell me she was my mother?" I asked. "Because Robert came looking for you," Evelyn said. "She changed your last name, moved to Boston, and built a life that could not lead him back. She lied because she believed the truth would make the house remember where you were." On the walk back, I tried to picture Diane holding me as an infant. Instead, I remembered Lucy. Not the pale figure in the unnumbered room, but a warm face above a yellow blanket. I remembered her humming while rain struck a window. I remembered the shape of a silver pendant at her throat. The memories arrived complete, carrying textures, smells, and emotions that did not belong to me. At the same time, pieces of Diane began to disappear. I could no longer remember the color of the apartment kitchen where she raised me. I knew she had attended my high school graduation, but her face in the crowd had become a blur. I opened my phone and stared at photographs, trying to force the details back. In every picture, Diane looked familiar but distant, like someone I had once met and failed to know. "The house is replacing them," Ethan said when I told him. "It is making space." That evening, I set the microcassette on the bedroom dresser and recorded myself describing Diane. Her laugh, her blue cardigan, The way she cut apples into thin slices and left the peels in one long spiral. I spoke quickly, afraid each fact might vanish before I finished. Halfway through, the bathroom faucet turned on by itself. Water ran for several seconds, then stopped. I approached the mirror above the sink. My reflection looked pale and exhausted. I raised one hand. It followed. Then it lowered its hand while mine remained lifted. The woman in the glass was no longer me. Lucy stood on the other side, wearing the silver pendant I had remembered. Her lips moved without sound. I leaned closer. Letters slowly appeared in the steam, gathering across the mirror, written from inside the glass. Robert remembers the night differently. Behind me, the bedroom door clicked shut. In the mirror, Lucy looked past my shoulder, and fear crossed her face. A man's voice spoke from the dark hallway. "Clara, your mother never told you why she locked that door." The man in the hallway spoke again, and this time the house answered him with 3 slow knocks from every wall. I stepped away from the mirror. Lucy vanished from the glass, leaving only my own frightened reflection and the words she had written in the steam. Robert remembers the night differently. Ethan called my name from downstairs, but his voice sounded impossibly far away. The bedroom door opened by itself. Beyond it was not the upstairs hall. The blue door stood 6 feet away, surrounded by darkness, its brass knob turning back and forth as though someone inside could not decide whether to enter or escape. The man's voice came from behind it. "Ask Diane what she did." I carried my recorder with me and crossed the threshold. Room 0 had changed. The layered wallpaper was gone. Rain struck a narrow window that did not exist before, and the bare bulb had been replaced by a ceiling fixture casting weak yellow light. A clock on the wall showed 2:13 in the morning. Diane stood beside the blue door, wearing her green raincoat. She was younger than I had ever known her, but fear had already drawn familiar lines around her eyes. Lucy was on the other side of the room, holding me beneath the yellow blanket. Robert Kane stood between them. For the first time, his face was visible. He was tall, neatly dressed, and disturbingly calm. Nothing about him matched the shape fear had given him in my mind. That made him worse. "Give me the papers," he said. Lucy shook her head. "I signed Clara's transfer. You cannot erase her from what this house remembers." Robert looked toward the child in her arms. Toward me. The room flickered, and the memory split like light passing through cracked glass. Diane's version came first. I saw the night through her eyes. Robert was shouting somewhere downstairs while wind shook the windows. Lucy had already hidden me in the narrow space beneath the stairs. She caught Diane by the wrists, told her exactly where to find me, and pressed the brass key into her hand. Robert was coming up the hallway. Diane pulled the blue door shut with Lucy inside and turned the lock. "Stay there," she whispered. "He cannot reach you if the house hides the room." Lucy pounded from the other side. "Diane, get Clara out." Diane ran to the space beneath the stairs, found me wrapped in yellow, and carried me across the road to Evelyn. When she returned, the blue door had vanished. In Diane's memory, she spent the remaining hours of the storm begging the walls to give her sister back. I heard her repeating the words that had followed me since I arrived. "I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry." The scene dissolved, and Robert's version took its place. Now I watched from behind his eyes. The house seemed darker, narrower, hostile to him. Lucy stood at the table with the deed in her hand. Robert believed she was stealing everything that belonged to him. The property, his name, his child. He saw Diane not as a frightened sister, but as an accomplice. In his memory, Lucy threatened to disappear and ensure he never saw Clara again. He insisted he only wanted to talk. He said the storm damaged the electrical panel. He said the lights failed because of the weather. He said the front door jammed by accident. Each explanation arrived before the event, like a defense prepared in advance. Then Lucy ran into room 0. Robert followed, but Diane closed the door between them. He struck the wall with his fist and demanded the key. The room shifted around him. Hallways lengthened. Doors changed places. He became convinced the house itself had chosen Lucy over him. "I left before midnight," Robert said inside the memory. "Whatever happened afterward was not my fault." The clock above him read 2:13. I stared at it, and the entire scene stopped. Robert's memory had exposed its own lie. He claimed he had already left, but he was still inside the house more than 2 hours later. The third version began before I could recover. Lucy stood in room 0 with me in her arms. I felt her heartbeat as though I had returned to my infant body. She placed me inside a shallow opening behind the wallpaper and covered me with the yellow blanket. "Be quiet for Aunt Diane," she whispered. She signed a quitclaim deed transferring part of her ownership to me, then slid the document beneath a loose floorboard. The brass key was not meant to open the room. It was meant to reveal the hidden transfer. Footsteps approached. Diane entered first, begging Lucy to leave through the kitchen. Robert's voice sounded from downstairs. Lucy pushed Diane toward the concealed space where I waited. "Take her across the road. Evelyn will help you." Diane lifted me from the wall and ran. Lucy remained behind because the original deed was still inside room 0, and without it Robert could claim the transfer was false. The memory shook violently. Wind screamed through the house. The ceiling light went dark. Robert entered the room carrying a flashlight. "Where is she?" he asked. Lucy said nothing. "Where did Diane take my daughter?" "Somewhere you cannot own her." The blue door slammed. The walls shifted. A heavy beam settled somewhere beyond them with a deep wooden groan. Robert tried the knob, but it would not turn. Lucy stood several feet away from him, trapped in the same room. This was not what Diane remembered. She had believed Lucy was alone behind the locked door. Robert had been inside with her. He moved toward the wall, searching for another exit, while Lucy pressed her hands against the wallpaper and called my name. Then the memory broke apart. I was back in the present, kneeling beneath the bare bulb. Ethan was pounding on the blue door from the hallway. My recorder lay beside me, still running. On its screen, the sound levels continued to move even though the room was silent. I pressed playback. Robert's voice emerged from the speaker, recorded more than 3 decades earlier. "She hid the child, but she will tell me where." A pause followed. Then came the sound of the blue door opening. Robert spoke again, farther from the recorder. "I know Diane crossed the road. I saw Evelyn take the baby." His statement continued for another 47 minutes after the time he had sworn he left the house. Near the end, Lucy whispered something I could barely hear. I increased the volume. "You can leave, Robert, but the house will keep the part of you that knows the truth." The recording ended with footsteps moving away from room 0. Not one set, but 2. The second matched Robert's stride half a beat late, like an echo refusing to fade. It did not sound like another person. It sounded like the hidden memory of what he had done following him out of the room. The blue door opened behind me, and Ethan pulled me into the hallway. I turned back before it closed. Lucy stood beneath the light, alone. Robert was gone. Then a shadow crossed the wall behind her, and his voice whispered directly into my recorder. I never left alone. Robert's whisper remained on the recorder after the blue door disappeared, repeating the same 4 words in a voice that grew clearer each time. I never left alone. Ethan played the recording 3 times, then lowered the device as the hallway lights flickered above us. If Lucy was still inside when he left, then who went with him? He asked. No one, I said. The second set was his own memory. The house made the truth follow him after he abandoned it. The house had not preserved only the ordinary imprint that every owner left behind. It had preserved the part of Robert that knew exactly what he had done. The floor beneath us shifted with a slow wooden groan. Doors opened throughout the house. From every room came a different sound. A child counting, a woman crying, a man turning pages, Diane whispering my name. The memories were no longer waiting for me to enter. They were moving toward me. I tried to remember the kitchen in our Boston apartment, the place where Diane had made pancakes every Sunday morning, but all I could see was Lucy standing beneath the bare bulb in room 0. I could not remember Diane's laugh. I could not remember the exact sound of her voice before the hospital changed it. Panic rose in my chest. The house is taking her, I said. It is replacing everything. Ethan gripped my shoulders. Then we finish this now. He spread the original survey, the altered deeds, and my mother's correction across the dining room table. The brass key lay beside them, turning slowly on its own until it pointed toward the floor. I remembered. Lucy hiding the transfer beneath a loose board. We searched the room until Ethan found a plank with no dust along one edge. The key fit into a narrow opening between the boards. When I turned it, the wood lifted. Beneath it rested a leather envelope sealed with dark wax. Inside were the original deed from 1928, an abstract of title carrying the full ownership chain, and Lucy's signed quitclaim deed. Robert Kane and Lucy Bennett shared the 7th entry on the abstract. Diane Bennett held the 8th. Then came my name, formally recorded as the 9th owner in 1999, in ink that had faded to brown. 2 sentences had been written in Lucy's hand across the back of the original deed. Ownership passes when the memory is acknowledged. What is fully remembered may travel with the witness. Ethan read it twice. This is not legal language. It was not written for the county. The house answered with 3 knocks. A section of wallpaper peeled away across the room, revealing the blue door. This time it stood open. Room 0 waited beyond it, filled with people. Every owner stood beneath the hanging bulb, transparent and silent, their faces turned toward me. Diane was among them. Lucy stood at the far wall. Robert stood beside the door, no longer hidden by shadow. "Bring the papers," he said. His voice came from the room and from my recorder at the same time. Ethan stepped forward, but the doorway narrowed until only I could pass. "Clara, do not go in," he said. "It already knows me," I answered. "That is why I have to." I carried the papers, the brass key, and the recorder into the room. The door closed behind me. Robert watched me with the calm expression from his memory. "Your mother filled your life with lies," he said. "Which mother?" His eyes moved toward Lucy. "Both of them." The owners around us began to speak, each repeating the moment the house had kept. Their voices overlapped until the air vibrated. Robert came closer. Diane locked the door. "Lucy chose the property over escape. I only wanted my daughter. You wanted control. That is what they believe." "No," I said. "That is what you remembered." His expression changed. The room trembled. I understood then that memory was his only shelter. As long as his version remained unchallenged, he could hide inside it. I raised the recorder and played the final 47 minutes from 1992. Robert's own voice filled room 0. He described seeing Diane cross the road with me. He demanded that Lucy reveal where Evelyn had hidden us. He admitted disabling the telephone and blocking the doors so no one could leave before he recovered the deed. His face seemed to blur with every word. "That recording is not the truth," he said. "It is your truth," I replied. "The house remembers what you knew, even when you refused to admit it." The scene around us changed. The storm returned. Lucy stood near the wall while Robert searched for the hidden papers. A support beam shifted outside the room, sealing the passage. He found another exit before dawn, a narrow opening leading into the cellar. He could have called for help. Instead, he left Lucy behind because helping her would expose what he had done. The final memory locked into place. Lucy pressed both hands against the wall and listened as his footsteps faded. She did not cry out for him. She whispered my name and began humming the lullaby. Robert's image cracked like a reflection disturbed by water. "You cannot prove any of this," he said. "I already recorded it." I placed the original deed, the abstract of title, and Lucy's quitclaim deed inside a small metal wastebasket that stood near the wall, though it had not been there before. Beside it lay a box of matches bearing the name of a Greyhaven restaurant that closed in 1994. I understood the choice the house was offering. It did not want destruction. It wanted release. I struck one match and held it to the corner of the original deed. The paper darkened, curled, and caught. Robert shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the memories of the other owners. One by one, their rooms vanished. The yellow kitchen disappeared. The counting child fell silent. The old clock moved past 2:13. Diane stepped toward me, tears in her eyes, and for one blessed moment I remembered everything about her. Her laugh, her blue cardigan, the apple peels, the way she held my hand in crowded places. "You were my mother," I told her. She smiled. "And Lucy was, too." Then she faded. Robert reached for the burning deed, but his hand passed through the flame. His image folded into the wall and disappeared with a final whisper that sounded more frightened than angry. The fire consumed the last signature, then folded inward and vanished without touching the floor or walls. The room became still. Lucy stood alone beneath the bulb. She looked younger now, no longer trapped in the final fear of that night. "Will you come with me?" I asked. She shook her head gently. "You carried my memory beyond these walls when you were 8. That was why the house could call you from far away." I looked at the recorder in my hand. "Then it is over?" "For me," she said. "But a memory that has been fully heard no longer needs the room that kept it. Be careful what you carry away." The blue door opened behind me. Morning light filled the hallway. Ethan was waiting on the other side. Lucy touched 2 fingers to her lips, then to the air between us. "You remembered me," she said. That was all I needed. The bulb went dark, and the room released its breath. The morning after room 0 went dark, the house finally allowed us to leave. The front door opened without resistance, and cold October air rushed through the entry hall, as though the building had been holding it back for more than 3 decades. Ethan stepped onto the porch first, but I remained inside long enough to listen. No counting child. No footsteps behind the walls. No lullaby drifting from the second floor. The clock in the living room had moved beyond 2:13 and now showed 7:46. Sunlight touched the covered furniture, and for the first time the white sheets looked like cloth rather than sleeping figures. I placed the brass key in the ceramic bowl beside the other 8 keys. The blank tag now carried my name in faded pencil. As I watched, the letters slowly disappeared. By the time I joined Ethan outside, the tag was empty again. Greyhaven officials arrived later that afternoon after Ethan contacted the county. We gave investigators certified county copies of the property records, Evelyn's notebooks, Lucy's recording, and a forensic copy of the file containing Robert's voice. No one believed the parts involving shifting rooms or memories inside the walls, but the documents were enough to reopen Lucy Bennett's disappearance. Records from 1992 confirmed that Robert Kane had lied about when he left the property. Telephone reports showed the line had been deliberately disconnected. A handwritten note in an archived case file mentioned a sealed interior space that officers could not locate during their original search. The house had hidden room 0 from them, just as it had hidden the truth from everyone who entered carrying a reason not to see it. Crews inspected the structure for 3 days. They found unstable framing, sealed passages, and a narrow cavity behind the eastern wall, but they found no blue door. They also found no trace of Lucy. I expected that discovery to break something inside me. Instead, I felt a quiet certainty that the part of her that mattered had already spoken. After an emergency structural condemnation, the town ordered the house demolished before winter. I watched from Evelyn's living room as machines pulled apart the roof, then the upper floor, then the walls that had remembered more than any person should. The wallpaper tore loose in long pale strips. For one moment, a flash of blue appeared deep inside the structure. I stood so quickly that Evelyn reached for my arm. Then the wall collapsed inward, and the color vanished beneath dust. Nothing unusual happened afterward. No voices came from the debris. No names appeared on the machinery. The brass key was never recovered. I returned to Boston with 2 boxes of copied records, personal notes, and recordings the investigators had duplicated and released, along with the corner of the yellow blanket sealed inside an archival case. For several weeks, I slept with the lights on. I recorded my memories of Diane every night, speaking into the same device I had carried through the house. At first I was afraid that I would forget her again, but the memories held. Her laugh returned first, then the smell of cinnamon in our apartment on Sunday mornings, then the way she always checked the lock twice before going to bed. I began to understand that fear had shaped much of her life, but love had shaped more of it. Diane had not stolen me from Lucy. She had carried me out because Lucy trusted her to do what she could not. I restored Lucy's full recording and submitted a forensic copy to the investigators. Her name was added to the missing persons memorial at the Greyhaven courthouse, and the case summary was amended to state that there was no evidence she had voluntarily abandoned her child. Robert Kane had died years earlier in another state, leaving behind no family willing to speak about him. His death prevented any legal reckoning, but the recording, supported by Evelyn's notes and the archived telephone records, became part of the reopened case file. For me, that was enough. Truth could arrive too late for punishment and still matter. In early December, Ethan called to say the county had finished clearing the property. The land would remain empty. No buyer wanted it, and Greyhaven had no plans to rebuild. Evelyn placed a small stone near the old gate with Lucy's name and the dates of her life. Beneath them she added 4 words: she was not forgotten. I visited before the first heavy snow. The lot looked smaller without the house. Bare earth stretched beneath the gray sky, and broken roots marked where the foundation had been. I stood near the center of what had once been the living room and heard only wind moving through the trees. "I remember you," I said. Nothing answered. That should have been the end. It almost was. 3 months later, while cataloging the recordings from Greyhaven, I found a file created at 2:13 in the morning on the night room 0 disappeared. I had never opened it because the label contained only a string of corrupted symbols. The recording lasted 58 seconds. At first I heard the fire consuming the deed, Lucy thanking me, and the blue door opening. Then came a silence longer than I remembered. I increased the volume. Beneath the silence was the soft movement of a child crawling through a narrow space. A woman hummed 3 descending notes. The child stopped. My own voice, 8 years old, whispered, "Aunt Lucy, why are you still inside the wall?" My hands went cold. I listened again. The voice was unmistakably mine, but the date made no sense. I had been 8 in 1999, 7 years after Lucy disappeared. Diane had brought me back to the house that year, yet I remembered almost nothing beyond the closet and the warning not to say my name. On the recording, Lucy answered the child. "Because the house has not learned how to let go." Then my younger voice asked, "Will it remember me when I leave?" Lucy was silent for several seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice came from much closer to the microphone. "It already does." The file ended with 3 knocks. I told myself the sound belonged to the past. I told myself the house was gone, the land was empty, and memory could not survive without walls to hold it. Then 3 slow knocks came from inside my Boston apartment. Not from the door, not from the window, from the wall behind my chair. My recorder turned on by itself. The red light glowed, and through the speaker a little girl began counting. She reached 8, paused, and whispered, "There should be 9.